Sometimes our words fail us, but our bodies feel things. We say things like my heart is breaking. Saying that is one thing. You can say it, and if you felt heartbreak, you can maybe start to empathize with that feeling. But when you see somebody that's in the throes of heartbreak or passion or despair, it's easier to relate. It's easier to empathize with what that person is feeling. And I think that being able to, as a experienced choreographer and as an experienced dancer, people are able to express deep, deep emotion through our bodies in a way that our words maybe can't sometimes. My name is Dr. Deborah Giles. I'm the Science and Research Director at a nonprofit called Wild Orca, and I'm also a field researcher for the University of Washington's Center for Conservation Biology, and I do field work on southern resident killer whales. I spend a lot of time in the water or on the water with the whales, trying to take data, analyze data, and produce information for the general public as well as scientists and policymakers tasked with recovering this population of animals. 2018, we ended up having two incredibly unique situations with the southern residents that really pushed the limits of my ability as a scientist to, I guess, educate people and get people engaged in what was happening. We ended up just having a potluck at South Beach, and we started talking about how do we get more people involved. And there's this whole segment, I think, of the population that takes information in a different sort of way than I'm accustomed to giving it out. We need to engage the artistic community. We need to engage artists to help us tell the story of what's happening with these whales and this region. I love it when art speaks to you, like touches you deeply. I think we're at a point in our society where we need to be pulling out all the stops. We need to be making as many crossovers of different disciplines in order to be able to convey what's really happening in nature and in the wild, and show our place in it, show our culpability, and give us guidance for what we can do to change it. Well, I think that one of the things that ballet can do is to help us to see what happens underwater. Two ballet dancers that are able to join together and move in unison, for example, can help us understand how the whales move in unison together underwater. When I watched a video of Amber's ballet, it transported me immediately into, I felt what she was feeling when she made that ballet. And the fact that all of these dancers were able to take that emotion and convey it in a way. I'll be really honest. Like ballet, I've loved watching ballet for the be able to look at how a human body can move. I've never been transported in a story as the story of a ballet. I've never really gotten that part of ballet. It's never, I've just really appreciated the human body. This transported me. Amber's ballet, I could see the body movement of the whales. I could see how the whales were moving through the water because of the way that her dancers were moving. And it was stunning. It was stunning for me to see. And it left me wanting to see more of that. And it wanted me to I wanted to ask her to convey more of what the whales experience through human ballet. Because in a way it gives an opportunity to see what's happening underwater even. The human body can translate what the whales are doing underwater where we can see it all. When we think about dance, the human body is an incredible machine. And the fact that we can translate our thoughts and feelings and our emotions into how our body moves, there's nothing like it. There's absolutely nothing like it. The ability to convey joy and camaraderie, the social bonds that the whales have, the pain that they're, maybe feeling, um, is just, it's incredible. And I'm really excited to see what's going to come next. J35 having a baby and having that baby, live for less than a half an hour, and then have that animal physically carrying that her deceased baby around for so long, 17 days. It was the most profound part of the whole thing, is seeing her forego socializing with her family, seeing with her forego food in order to keep her infant with her. For me, it was a physical manifestation of her grief. The sheer amount of energy that she had to put into that movement to keep that baby afloat, it was no small feat for her to do that day after day. And I think that is her conveying her emotion through her physicality. Being able to express emotion through body movement without having to bog it down with words, I think can be a more direct pathway of emotion being expressed. And I think that's what resonated with the world with J35. There was no other way to interpret what was happening. She was expressing her emotion through her body. And so for humans to be able to, I'll be honest, I felt what she was feeling. I felt what it was like. Even though I've never have given birth, I could feel the deep, deep passion and despair that she was feeling by the way that she was carrying that calf. She did for the world what no scientist has ever been able to do in words or in peer-reviewed journal articles. She conveyed the severity of the plight of this population to the world in a way that a scientist never could. And so for we humans to be able to take a lesson from that, to be able to say, maybe body movement is what we need to be doing. Maybe we need to hug each other more. Maybe we need to physically feel what each other is going through. Dancers moving together and creating an image and creating a scene starts to move us more towards that, takes us down that path a little bit more. More often than I like, but quite often get asked this question of, so what if the southern residents go extinct? There's other killer whales in this region. There's other killer whales in the world. It would be sad, but really, what's the importance to this ecosystem that the southern residents provide? And I always am, even though I get asked that question quite often, I'm always shocked that people can even think that way. Because for me, we're talking about a culture of beings that were here before we were. They were the original harvesters of salmon. They were the ones that whose culture developed and solidified eating salmon. And their purpose here is to be almost like sentinels for what this ecosystem should be. If we have southern resident killer whales, it means that we've undone some of the damage that we've visited upon this whole world, but this region. We know what has caused the decline of the southern residents, and 100% of the threats come from humans. 100% of the things that are causing the southern residents to decline are caused by us. And as a species, I want us to be enlightened enough to recognize our place in our culpability in the demise of the natural world, and be adult and responsible enough to take the steps necessary to undo some of the damage we've done. And I feel that for a species for us to allow an ancient civilization, an ancient tribe to go extinct is not, it's not an option. And that's why I think taking this discussion outside of the regular arena, even outside of the political arena for a moment, because it all comes down to politics, but bringing it outside of the scientific and management and political arena and putting it into this other arena that will bring more people into the discussion, passionate people that this issue resonates deeply with. That's where this is why we're doing what we're doing. This is why we're having deep dive. This is why people like Amber are creating amazing ballets to help express what's happening and hopefully to empower people to want to do something to change it. So we're these distinct species, humans and killer whales, and yet we share so many different cultural traits with them. In a lot of ways, I've said this before, where it's almost like killer whales are a better us. Their society shows us what we could be or what we should be. The whales themselves have created a family of people that are rallying behind them to try and recover them. And they did that. The whales themselves did that last year with their, just the incredible sadness that the whole community went through. They pulled the human people around the world together to fight for them. These greeting ceremonies would be such where all of J-Pod would line up in a row, peck to peck, touching each other. So all of J-Pod and all of K-Pod facing each other like this and just hovering at the surface. We don't really know what the cue is, but something would happen within the Southern Resident community, and suddenly it just would become this ball of whales. Just crazy whales flying all over each other, rolling over the surface of the water on each other, breaching, tail slapping, spy hopping. Just an incredible party situation is what it looked like. And that's when you would see these, females that would group up together, females that were just coming into that time of life where they might be able to get pregnant, would hover around females that were pregnant. Calves, playing with each other, males taking off for the half an afternoon, mating going on, just an incredible social greeting ceremony. And unfortunately, we don't get to see that anymore because there's not enough food to bring even full members of J-Pod in, for example. We have now what I call modified rest. True resting was where the whales would line up, much like the greeting ceremony. They would touch each other, get close enough to be in body contact with one another, and move through the environment almost as one being. And the reason that they did that was because killer whales are conscious breathers. So they have to consciously take every breath. They have a function where they can rest half their breath at a time, half their brain at a time. But they're conscious breathers. They have to keep half their brain awake in order to make that happen. One of the ways that they're able to help that experience is to touch one another and get in these lines, these resting lines. And when they do that, ultimately what they do is they'll have one whale that stays more awake. And their breath triggers the breath of the rest of the animals. So we used to get to see this very synchronous, almost where you could set your watch by it. They would come up for a series of 3 to 5 breaths, and then they would go down on a longer dive that might last 5 to 7 minutes. And then come up for a series of 3 to 5 breaths, go down again for that, these intervals of time. And that's when you knew that the whales were actually semi-unconscious and they were able to rest. Whales are resting only 6.9% of the time during daylight hours. That's a significant change from 25 to 7% over time. We're actually seeing them foraging significantly more during daylight hours. So the amount of time that they used to be resting, they're now foraging. And the reason that they're foraging more is because there's fewer fish to find. And when they do find a fish, that fish is significantly smaller than it used to be. So they're shifting their behavior states Hopefully they're getting rest at night. It's one of the science research projects that's underway right now. There's an inherent disconnect in the fact that we are trying to recover Chinook salmon in order for humans to kill Chinook salmon. There's also a conflict in the fact that we are trying to recover salmon knowing that the southern residents need salmon, specifically Chinook, to survive, and yet the southern residents don't have a place at the table when fisheries management decisions are being made. That's an inherent conflict in the mandates of the federal government, A, to recover this listed population of whales, and B, to recover the salmon that they rely on. All of that is in conflict with each other. And until we decide that we're going to do business differently because we value the intrinsic value of the whales themselves and the salmon that they rely on, we're going to continue to have problems. Until the whales get recognized as a major stakeholder, again, I'm trying to get this term like used widely. They were the original harvesters. They were eating Chinook salmon before humans populated this part of the world. As the original harvesters of Chinook salmon, they deserve to have an allocation. They deserve to have a portion of that salmon allocated for their needs. They need it for their very survival, let alone the recovery of a population. Just the 75 mouths out there right now, the 75 whales that need to eat every day, just like you and I do, it's our responsibility to recover the salmon for them, for the salmon and for the whales, and then for humans. Right now, that's not the way that it is. We are trying to recover wild populations of salmon and increase hatchery salmon for human consumption. And there's an inherent disconnect there. And until we recognize that, and until we're willing to say, we need to change the way that we're doing business in order to have these things, we're going to continue to see the decline of salmon and therefore the decline of southern residents. Most of the adult whales do have rake marks across their backs, but they're superficial. They're clearly not aggressive in the way that they're harming each other. Moms might use their teeth a little bit to check a rambunctious youngster, for example. J27 was swimming, and we were trying to put a suction cup tag on his brother, and the younger brother just came up and latched onto the backside of J27's dorsal fin with his teeth, and J27 just kept swimming, just really slowly at the surface, and his little brother was just latched on and just going along for the ride. We definitely see more of that surface active behavior when there's more food. So when they're better fed, they're more apt to be social, and exhibit these surface active behaviors more. Everything always comes back to food. I feel like a politician that's answering the questions I want to be asked. I'm not even meaning to, but literally everything that you can ask me and talk to me about comes back to the fact that there's not enough food for these whales. They will just roll around on each other for play and for touch. Their skin is incredibly sensitive. They can feel things very, just a light touch they can feel. These whales are known to kelp, so they'll purposely diverge from a path in order to go and find a kelp bed and just roll around in it. And it probably just feels good. They'll play with buoys sometimes, push things around in the water, and they do engage in a lot of social behavior. There's mating behavior occurring with all age and sex class of animals, and that's probably part of their social bonding. Some of the last imagery that we have of J2, the oldest female, the oldest whale known to man that we know of, J2 had lost her most direct relative, J14, and some of the last imagery that we had of J2 was of her corralling fish to J14's grandson. So this is J2's great-grandson. J14 wasn't there to do that anymore. You know, they are a matriarchal society. It is the females that lead the groups. They're the ones that make the decisions for where the family's going to go. J2 was the matriarch of all matriarchs. So many times we would see J2 slap her tail, quickly on the surface of the water, and every single member of the Southern Resident clan would come to her side and choose the pathway in which she decided to go. And, to have her foraging for this youngster who had lost his mom fairly that year was just a really powerful vision to see. You know, taking care of family members even in light of the fact that you're dying yourself. And I think that that's the power of these amazing females. They're teaching their offspring and their grand offspring and great grand offspring how to be with each other, how to share, and how to live. When you think about the potential for that learning and that teaching to break down, because we're losing females too young. They're not even getting old enough to become the matriarch of their family. We're not having females live as long as J2 was at least in her 80s, possibly older. We're not having females getting to be that old, and so they're just physically not around in order to lead their families and teach their young, their daughters the way of the world, the way of being a Southern resident. And I think that's a very scary thing. And again, it just leads back to we humans getting our act together, changing the way that we do business and the way that we operate in the world in order to create a healthy environment that allows this population of animals to survive and thrive, get old, have babies, have those babies be born alive and survive into adulthood. That social learning, that culture requires a healthy ecosystem in order to have individuals get old enough in order to pass that knowledge on. So I think that I do believe that part of the reason why humans relate so deeply with killer whales in particular is because they have such unique family culture, group culture, ecotype culture. It makes it easier for us to understand them. We have a direct analogy with our own humanity. Get educated about the situation. Get educated and then pass on that knowledge. And then lastly, get active. Whether that's in the form of creating art of any type, whether that's in the form of picking up your telephone or getting on your computer and sending your thoughts and desires to your elected officials, that's powerful. Get involved in politics. Get other people involved in politics. Every single thing that we're talking about in order to recover this population is going to take everybody engaging in whatever avenue they can. Do whatever is within your power to help get the information out to the public. Get engaged. Find other people. Find your pod and move forward to save these pods. Together is the only way that we're going to solve this problem. That's hilarious. That's my phone. When I was young, quite young, maybe 6 or 7 or so, my parents tell the story of me waking up in the middle of the night and coming out and telling them this dream that I had about a black and white whale. And in the dream, I changed places with this whale that was, I don't know how I could have possibly described it to my parents, but basically when they related to me when I was older, I was describing a captive whale. And in my dream, I changed places with this whale so that the whale could experience freedom for a while. And my parents later, when I was quite a bit older, almost 16, and very passionate about captivity and being, you know, anti-captivity for whales, they remembered that dream that I had had and told me about it. And I just think that that's a really, it's a strange thing for a kid on a worm farm to be dreaming, for one thing. We didn't really have TV. We did go to the library a lot, so I must have seen a killer whale picture in a book. But how I ever came up with the concept of a killer whale in captivity, I have no idea. But it's something that has absolutely driven my work, my life's work, to try and do everything in my power to increase the health of the ecosystem for wild killer whales and speak out on behalf of captive killer whales, which I've done as often as I can. We're on San Juan Island in the heart of the Salish Sea. I'm looking out this window at the range of the Olympic Mountains in the distance. I can see Discovery Island, which is at the tip of Vancouver Island. And this is the summer core critical habitat for the southern resident killer whales. This is the region that was protected by our federal government in 2008. And it's the region that we humans need to do everything in our power to try and recover. Because while it looks pristine out there, while it looks amazing, breathtakingly beautiful, it's hurting. This ecosystem is hurting from the base mud layers all the way up through the entire food web. It's in dire straits. It literally is in dire straits, and we are more and more coming to realize that, and thankfully more and more people are getting engaged. And so this art show, Deep Dive, is an opportunity for artists to help convey the health of the ecosystem, this ecosystem in particular, to the public. And then on the back end, we want to provide avenues for people to engage and be empowered to do something about it. Is this going to be a distraction?
Might be, yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it probably will be.
Continuity or
Okay.
nothing else.